There are days when everything seems to go against you. A message that makes your blood boil. A single word that leaves you feeling betrayed. Work falls apart. A relationship cracks. Someone offends you, and you react instantly. Anger, hurt, blame, a desire to prove you're not weak. Emotions rise like a tidal wave, sweeping you away before you even realize where you are. But pause and ask yourself, why can a single sentence ruin an entire day? Why can a glance keep you awake the whole night? Are you living according to how others make you feel instead of how you choose to live? This is not a story about how to stop feeling. It's about how not to let your feelings control you. How to stay rational in your worst moments, when just 1 second of losing control could cost you your sense of self. In this video, I'll share 5 guiding principles drawn from the philosophy of Stoicism. The same principles that helped kings face loss, warriors overcome fear, and ordinary people stay calm in the eye of life's storms. And if you've ever felt exhausted by your own emotions, maybe you should stay until the end of this video. Because this is not just a philosophy, this is a weapon to help you reclaim control over your own life. Principle 1, pause for a moment. People often think strength lies in reacting quickly, but for the Stoics, true strength lies in not reacting immediately. When emotions surge, anger, fear, hurt, disappointment, the most instinctive thing is to respond instantly. Many people will speak up right away, do something to protect their sense of control or dignity. But the quicker we act, the more likely we become victims of our own fleeting emotions. Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher who ruled the Roman Empire during times of war and plague, wrote in Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." He didn't write this in a quiet room, but during tense nights on the battlefield, amid screams, clashing weapons, and betrayal from those once close to him. Yet, he never lost himself. He learned to pause. The Stoics trained this response as a survival skill, to insert a moment of pause between stimulus and reaction. You can picture it like this. There are 2 versions of you. One is angry, ready to lash out, explode, and vent. The other is calmer, wiser, and usually only appears after a few moments of reflection. Every time you fail to pause, the first version takes over, and you live with the consequences of impulsive actions. But if you learn to pause, just for a few seconds, you allow the better version of yourself to show up. Specifically, the Stoics suggest practicing 3 simple steps. Step 1, stay silent for 10 seconds. No talking, no reacting. Step 2, take a deep breath. Feel the air entering and leaving to separate yourself from the emotional wave rising inside. Step 3, ask yourself one question. Will I regret reacting this way? It may sound simple, but in the heat of emotion, it's an act that goes against instinct. It requires awareness, and that's what the Stoics practiced every day. For example, consider former U.S. President Barack Obama, who was once insulted directly during a debate. Instead of getting angry or firing back, he simply smiled, paused for a few seconds, then replied with a short, composed remark. That moment silenced the entire room and earned him full respect, not because he argued better, but because he knew how to pause. He controlled himself, while his opponent did not. You don't have to be a politician to understand the value of pausing. In a heated argument with a loved one, a message that makes you angry, or a sarcastic remark at work, if you pause before responding, you are reclaiming control over your life. Many people think pausing is weakness. In reality, it's a form of strength because you are telling your emotions, I see you, but I won't act on you. It's a deliberate choice, not an unconscious reaction. Seneca, a renowned orator and Stoic, once said, "No victory is more glorious than victory over oneself." And to conquer yourself, the first step is always to pause. No rushing, no swinging your fists, no saying words you'll regret. In real life, I knew a young entrepreneur who almost lost a major contract because of one angry email. Later, he learned never to respond to any message immediately if it made him feel unsettled. He would write, but not send. Read it again an hour later, and most of the time, he chose to delete. Instead of winning a short-term argument, he preserved his credibility and long-term respect. If you're watching this video on a bad day, remember this: emotions come and go. But the actions you choose when you're angry, hurt, or out of control can have consequences that last for years. So next time emotions rise, don't do anything yet. Pause, breathe, and choose the response you won't regret once calm returns. It might just be 10 seconds, but those 10 seconds can change a day, a relationship, even your entire life. Principle 2. Separate events from interpretations. There is something peculiar about how the human brain works. We don't just see events as they are. We always attach a layer of emotion, a layer of meaning. That isn't inherently bad, but it can make us suffer. The Stoics understood this well, and they taught us to clearly separate two things: the objective event and our interpretation of that event. For example, someone says something critical to you. That's the event. But thinking that they looked down on you, deliberately insulted you, or that you're a failure, that's your interpretation. Those are two entirely different things. Epictetus once said, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them." In other words, no one can hurt you unless you allow negative meaning to enter the way you see the situation. Imagine you're driving and someone behind you keeps honking loudly. You might interpret that as impatience, disrespect, and get angry, but you could also think they might be in a rush for an emergency, and you just happen to be in the way. Same event, different interpretation, different emotions. The Stoics practice looking at everything in a neutral light. When something happens, they try to describe it in simple, emotion-free language. Instead of saying, "I was insulted," they would say, "Someone said something." Instead of, "I failed miserably," they would say, "I did not achieve the result I expected." The words you use shape your emotional state, because words don't just express emotions, they create emotions. Marcus Aurelius used to write daily journals describing events without assigning negative meaning. He didn't write, "I was betrayed today," but a former collaborator chose his personal gain. That didn't make him weak. It showed he maintained reason even while hurt. In real life, think of a time when you reread a message and realized it wasn't as harsh as it felt the first time. That's because time stripped the emotions away, helping you see the event more objectively. Stoics don't wait for time to do that. They do it immediately, as emotions arise. Epictetus once recommended a simple exercise to his students. Whenever something provokes a strong emotional reaction, try to rewrite the event as neutrally as possible. For instance, instead of "I was humiliated in public," write, "Someone said something I didn't want to hear, and many people witnessed it." This exercise may feel dry, but it teaches something essential: mastering interpretation. In today's world, fast-paced, reactive, judgment-heavy, more people suffer not because of what happens, but because of how they interpret what happens. They are not wounded by the world. They are wounded by the story they tell themselves about the world. I once knew a young woman who was rejected after a job interview, and she told me, "They must have thought I was terrible." But when I asked, "Did they say that?" she admitted number. They simply said, "We've chosen a candidate who better matches the technical requirements." That's the truth. The rest, she added herself. From then on, she practiced rewriting such events to separate emotion from fact. As a result, she became more composed, and a few months later, she landed her dream job. You can't control everything that happens to you, but you can control the story you tell yourself about it. And the remarkable thing is, when you change the story, you change the emotion. When you change the emotion, you change the action. And when your actions change, so do your outcomes. So if today someone hurt you or something made you angry, sad, or disappointed, try to pause for a moment and ask, what actually happened? And what part did I add on my own? If you can separate those two, you've done one of the hardest things a person can do, remain rational in the midst of emotion. That is the second step in staying grounded during the worst moments of life. Principle 3, focus on what you can control. There is a simple yet powerful truth. If you keep trying to control things beyond your reach, you will suffer. But if you learn to conserve your energy for what you truly have power over, you will become strong. This is the core principle of all Stoic thinking. Epictetus opened his Enchiridion, a handbook for life, with this sentence, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." He went on to say, if you can distinguish between the two, you will never be forced, hindered, or complain about life again. It sounds simple, but to truly live by this is a real path of inner training. Because most of us do the opposite. We try to change other people. We try to make them like us. We try to avoid risks. We try to make everything go according to plan. When something goes wrong, we blame others, complain, and search for reasons. When someone treats us poorly, we lose sleep. When results don't meet our expectations, we label it a failure. The Stoics thought differently. They divided the world into two halves. One half you can control, and the other you cannot. Your emotions, actions, responses, choices, thoughts, these belong to you. But what others say, what others think, what has already happened, what outcomes arrive, these do not. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer not because of events, but because of false expectations about them." A false expectation that someone will be kind to you, that the world will be fair, that things will go as planned. And when reality defies those expectations, we collapse. But if from the start we understand we cannot control the weather, people, or fate, then when these things change, we're not shocked, not disappointed, not disillusioned. I once worked with a middle-aged man. He lost his job after a company merger. For the first 3 months, he kept saying, "I didn't deserve this," and "they betrayed me." But after a long conversation, I asked him, "Did you have control over that layoff decision?" He went silent, and for the first time, he admitted, no, he had no control over the leadership's decision, but he could control how he responded. A few weeks later, he began planning to learn a new skill. 3 months after that, he got a new job, even better than the one he lost. What changed wasn't fate. It was his locus of control. When you shift your focus from things outside your reach to things you can act upon, you regain power. You are no longer a victim. You become the one steering the ship. Marcus Aurelius, the greatest emperor of Rome, once wrote in his journal, "I cannot control what happens to me, but I can always choose how I respond." And he lived that way. In war, in loss, in betrayal, he remained rational, kind, and resilient. Because he didn't place his fate in the hands of others. He placed it in his own choices. In everyday life, whenever you feel angry, frustrated, or helpless, ask yourself a simple question. Am I trying to control something that's beyond my reach? Maybe it's what someone said. Maybe it's the outcome of a situation. Maybe it's someone not acting the way you hoped. When you see that clearly, take a step back. Return to the second question. What can I actually control right now? Maybe it's how you respond, how you think, how you choose to act. When you focus on that, you're no longer ruled by emotions. You become the commander of your emotions. Life is unpredictable, but your response is always within your control. And that is the true strength the Stoics passed down through thousands of years, from Roman battlefields to your hardest days today. Principle 4. Act according to values, not emotions. In the harshest moments, what defines who you become is not the emotion you're experiencing, but the values you choose to hold on to. Emotions push you into instinctive reactions. Anger makes you lash out. Sadness makes you retreat. Fear makes you run. But values keep you standing, like a pillar in a storm. Most people act on emotions because it's easier. It comes quickly, without thought. But Stoics understand this. Precisely when you're tired, offended, or lost, that is when you most need to act according to your values. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, remember that you have one job: to be a good person." That's it. Be good, not because others deserve it, but because that's the value you choose to live by. In a conversation with a peacekeeping soldier who had served in Africa, I once asked him, "Were there moments when you wanted to strike back?" He smiled and said, "Many times. But if I fought back out of anger, I'd be just like them. If I stayed calm and did what I was trained to do, I stayed true to myself. I was silent, but that stayed with me. Stay true to yourself. That's the aim of value-driven action. When you act from values, you don't react randomly. You choose to live in line with what you believe is right, regardless of how others behave or what the situation is. Seneca once said, "A wise person does not allow themselves to be swept away by the changes of fate, but stands firm in what is essential to their character." Values like fairness, compassion, resilience, and honesty, they're not just slogans on a wall. To the Stoics, they are a compass. And when you walk through a storm with a compass in your hand, you don't lose your way. Think back to a time when you reacted out of anger. Did you act in line with who you want to be? Or did you let emotion take the wheel? Emotion tells you to retaliate, to prove you're right, to make the other person regret it. But values tell you, be kind, be patient, maintain your dignity. Once, after 27 years in prison, Nelson Mandela was finally released. At his first dinner, after gaining freedom, he invited some of his former jailers to sit at the table. A reporter asked him why. He simply said, "If I didn't leave the bitterness behind, I'd still be in prison." He chose freedom, not just physical, but mental. That is acting from values. It's not easy, But if you don't practice this when life is calm, you won't be able to do it when things get hard. So start with small things. Someone speaks harshly. You choose silence because you value calm. You witness injustice. You speak up because you value justice. You're rejected. You remain polite because you won't let emotion shrink who you are. With every such action, you reaffirm your identity, not according to passing emotion, but by the values you choose to live by. And looking back, you'll realize the strongest people are not those without emotion, but those who don't let emotions define their character. Principle 5. Widen your perspective. Place pain in a larger frame. When you are in pain, your mind narrows. It sees only the present, the loss, the wrong, the shouldn't have happened. Emotion locks you inside a dark room. But Stoic philosophy teaches you to open the door, to step back, to see more broadly, not to be trapped in a single narrow moment of your life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Imagine the whole of time, from the birth of the universe to the end of everything, and place your trouble within it." When you do this, you see, your sadness is just a small part of a vast flow. It is real, but it is not everything. The story of a father who lost his son in war once stayed with me. He said, "I used to think my life was over, but then I thought of the many other fathers who were also suffering. I thought about the pain of humanity, and I realized I was not alone. I started writing letters to other families. The more I wrote, the lighter I felt." He didn't deny his grief. He simply placed it within a wider frame. Epictetus said, "We suffer not from events, but from our judgment about them." If you look at pain through a narrow personal lens, it overwhelms you. But if you view it through the lens of your entire life, you see it as part of a larger journey. To see broadly does not mean ignoring pain. It is the brave act of accepting that pain can have meaning, perhaps even be necessary. In their darkest moments, Stoics don't ask, "Why me?" They ask, "What can I learn from this? Who can I become after this?" Think of those you admire most. They've all faced loss, failure, suffering. But instead of letting those emotions break them, they placed them within a broader vision and kept walking. Steve Jobs once said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward." Widening your view means believing that what hurts today may later become one of the dots that leads you to something greater. Imagine your life as a giant mosaic with thousands of pieces. Each pane is just one tile, isolated, unclear, sometimes ugly. But if you keep assembling the pieces, the picture begins to emerge, and one day you'll see that even the painful parts helped shape something meaningful. Stoics train this habit of broad vision daily. They journal to reflect. They observe the stars to remember their own smallness. They revisit history to remind themselves suffering is something humanity has always overcome. When you learn to look wider, through knowledge, through experience, through empathy for others' pain, you are no longer entirely ruled by emotion. You begin to see life with more maturity, more depth. And sometimes that alone allows you to keep going with a quiet but resilient strength, just as the Stoics intended. Emotions are inevitable. We cannot live without anger, sadness, fear, or disappointment. But amidst those storms, you can still keep your hands on the wheel if you choose to live with the Stoic spirit. The 5 principles we just explored are not theories on paper. They are guiding compasses forged thousands of years ago, that still hold value in the most chaotic moments of today. Pause so you don't act on impulse. Separate emotion from event to see clearly. Control your reaction to preserve your dignity. Act according to values instead of impulses, and broaden your view so that one fleeting moment doesn't throw your whole life off course. That is how the Stoics lived, not with cold indifference, but with clarity, courage, and deep humanity. In today's world, where a single message can rattle your calm, where everyone rushes to react rather than reflect, living as a Stoic is an act of resistance. But it is also an act of building. Building a person you can trust. Building a strength no one can take away. Building a life in which, even when everything around you falls apart, you remain steady within. True strength is not about never feeling emotions. It lies in your ability to not let them dictate your actions, define who you are, or determine your path. If you've ever lost control, said what you shouldn't, or regretted a rushed decision, that's okay. That's part of being human. But you can begin again. Right now, take a breath. Pause. Observe the emotion rising. Name it. Watch it like a passing cloud. Then ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? That question, and how you answer it, will determine whether you're swept away or whether you're in command. And that is the beginning of a life that is strong, free, and full of dignity.